What will your favorite NFL team do at the trade deadline? Welcome, football fans. It's Mitch here, live. And we are here to discuss every NFL contender, every NFL buyer, and what they might do at the trade deadline, addressing their needs and, in my opinion, the biggest spots to fill if they want to make a run to the Super Bowl, the NFC Championship, the AFC Championship, and have success down the stretch of the NFL season. So let me know in the comments if you're a fan of a contender. And no, guys, the Patriots are not a contender. I'm sorry. We're not buyers. We're sellers. But there's also teams that I will mention, like Jacksonville, like Cleveland, like the Patriots, teams across the NFL that might also be sellers. And I'll mention those players that might be selling to buyers out there. Teams like the Chiefs, who made a big trade earlier today, actually for a New England Patriot. That's right. Josh Uche has been traded for a 2026 sixth round selection. And Josh Uche, we thought he might be traded because he was a healthy scratch just yesterday against the Jets. And a player like Uche, although he has kind of become a role player for New England over the past couple of seasons, he's not someone that you just healthy scratch. He's definitely an important player because he's such an impactful pass rusher. When you get those opportunities to rush the quarterback, when you're in the lead, a third down that you need to get off the field, Josh Uche has such a deep bag of pass rush tricks. This is a guy that is an excellent prototypical speed rusher. He can tie together that bend that you love to see from an edge rusher, that quick step, and then also a little bit of a spin move, uses his hands to get around the corner. He's somebody that I've always really loved. He was a second-round pick out of Michigan once upon a time for the Patriots, selected by none other than the legendary Bill Belichick, and he brought an impact to the pass rush. But he also brought inconsistency, and it felt like he was always trying to fulfill a potential that he almost never fulfilled in New England. He did have one season where he put it all together. That was 2022. He had 11 and a half sacks on the Patriots in 2022. And the other seasons, he hasn't even put together a season where I think he has 11 and a half sacks the other 4 total seasons of his NFL career. So he's kind of an interesting case because I think some teams view him as a very talented rusher that would play more snaps. But in New England, especially under Bill Belichick, he was never viewed as an every down player. He was never viewed as a player that could go out there, set the edge against the run game, play on first and second down, stop the run, and then on third down also contribute and get after the quarterback and pressure the quarterback. For Belichick specifically, and now Gerard Mayo this past half a season, he was always viewed as just a sub-package rusher, a guy that is very athletic, bendy, quick, got great skills to contribute as a blitzer, as a rusher, but not as somebody that you could rely on consistently to stop the run and play on all downs in all situations. So I view him in the depth chart for Kansas City as someone that will just help them get off the field. I think his skill set is perfect for Steve Spagnuolo because Spagnuolo loves to blitz. He loves to be aggressive. He loves to play man coverage behind blitzing, right? And Uche is one of those talents that I honestly don't know if they have a guy like this at the edge position. He's extremely quick and fast and twitchy, right? George Karlaftis, he's a power rusher. Mike Dana is kind of like a hybrid D-tackle defensive end. Charles Omenihu will come back at some point during the season. He's similar in that way. Defensive tackle, defensive end, power player. Uche is a different player that the Chiefs do not have. A bendy, twitchy speed rusher that can get to the quarterback in a flash, working on stunts and blitzes alongside Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, and the rest of the front. So don't expect to see Uche out there on first down, stopping the run, or in the goal line package, but expect to see him on third down. Expect to see him in second and long. Expect him to see him in the fourth quarter a lot when the Chiefs are in the lead. He is somebody that is a closer, and he can contain quarterbacks, track down quarterbacks. He'll be an excellent asset when you're playing a team like Lamar Jackson and the Ravens or the Bills and Josh Allen, having to contain some mobile quarterbacks in the AFC and the NFL. So Josh Uche, sad to see him go as a Patriots fan, but it made total sense. He was on a one-year contract, not a lot of money. He's going to be cheap for the Chiefs for this next half a season. We'll see if he can contribute to a three-peat in Kansas City. 6th round pick in 2026 goes to the Chiefs. Okay, so that's Josh Uche news. Let me know what you guys thought of that move in the chat. Let's get to the main topic of the video, which is my trade deadline predictions. And honestly, it's not so much predictions, but kind of like a game plan for each of these teams. What should they address? What should they do? What should they try to achieve during the trade deadline? So we're going to start off with a team that has had a little bit of a roller coaster start to the NFL season, a little bit of an underwhelming start to the NFL season for San Francisco. But San Francisco is kind of known for this. People kind of overlook this. But 2023 was the only season in which they started off very strong. 2022 and 2021, they made the NFC Championship and they started 3-4 and 3-5 in those seasons. Now they're 4-4 at the bye week. They're getting Christian McCaffrey back. They're going to get Dre Greenlaw back. And now they're looking to add some pieces to their team to hopefully make them once again reach the NFC Championship game. It does feel like they're not the favorite for the first time in a while in their conference, but they're certainly a team that can still contend. So where are their biggest holes? In my opinion, it's all about the defensive line and the depth on the defensive line. I think personally that they should look to add a big, beefy defensive tackle, somebody that can get in there on the early downs and help them stuff the run. I think one of the biggest negatives about the Niners defense is not necessarily that it's bad, not necessarily that they have a bad run defense. Actually, the past 2 weeks, they've been extremely good against the run. Even the past like 3 games or so, they've been extremely good against the run. But they don't cause a lot of negative plays. And I think that has to do with the point of attack. When other teams are running the ball, like let's say the Chiefs game, they don't have that push with a big nose tackle in the middle of their defense that can just stop the run. So somebody like Davon Godchaux of the Patriots, we just talked about Josh Uche. The Patriots are sellers. Davon Godchaux has been one of the best run stoppers in football the past couple of years. He's not someone that stands out statistically, but he's somebody that takes up a lot of space and eats up a lot of blocks, and he makes other people like a Fred Warner perhaps, or a Dre Greenlaw when he returns, or a Nick Bosa. It takes pressure off them on the defensive line to be able to eat up blocks and get others to make the play on the ball. Shelby Harris and Dalvin Tomlinson are 2 others from Cleveland that have been very good. They're veterans. They've played across the NFL in multiple systems. Dalvin Tomlinson would be more of the nose tackle type, while Shelby Harris would be more of a typical, kind of Niners defensive tackle. Remember, they lost Javon Hargrave, but Javon Hargrave actually was a better pass rusher than he was a run defender. Then there's other positions. Perhaps the defensive end position is a position that they could address. A big name like Harold Landry. They went out and they added Chase Young last year because they felt like they needed the second edge rusher to complement Nick Bosa. Could they do that again? They do have Leonard Floyd, who's played pretty well in my opinion, but he is an aging player that as the season wears on, he's going to slow down. So a third edge rusher, like maybe a bigger name like Harold Landry to lessen the load on Leonard Floyd, maybe Ojulari from New York, or maybe they bring back Chase Young, who's been in New Orleans on a 1-year contract. Browning from Denver. There's a lot of different players out there that they could potentially attack in a role, or maybe even go after a big name like Landry. I think this team is probably more likely to go for a defensive tackle and a defensive end and just beef up the depth rather than trying to add some big magical piece that's going to fix everything. I also low-key wouldn't mind if they attacked wide receiver or even the offensive line. I do think a center could be pretty interesting for the Niners, but I don't necessarily see a lot of upgrades across the NFL. The one that came to mind is maybe Mitch Morse of Jacksonville, but that's the only one that I could really find that I would think would be logical to trade. Otherwise, wide receiver, a lot of people are going to think is attractive for the Niners, but I think they're just going to allow Ricky Pearsall to fill the role of Brandon Ayuk. Jawan Jennings didn't play against Dallas. He's a really good player. I think they'll just let him help them out in terms of receiving the football. And don't forget, Christian McCaffrey is a darn good receiver himself. So I think they're fine offensively It's more about the defensive line, helping their pass rush, helping their run defense for the rest of the season. Their secondary right now is playing phenomenal football, and Dre Greenlaw will also help their coverage. So I think the Niners are in a good spot. They have a bye week right now. They should be able to load up with some depth at the trade deadline. From the chat, Commanders need a wide receiver. We're going to talk about the Commanders. Wide receiver is interesting for them. I do think they should favor defense, but wide receiver definitely should be in the conversation. Falcons need a pass rusher. Falcons definitely need a pass rusher. We're actually not talking about the Falcons in this video, unfortunately, but I do think that they do need a pass rusher. Somebody like was mentioned earlier in my previous stream. Could Zadarius Smith go to the Falcons? That would be another old man on the Falcons defensive front. I don't necessarily know if they would want that. Maybe somebody a little bit younger that has some potential, maybe like Browning from Denver or Ojulari from the Giants. Myles Garrett to the Bills, that's not going to happen. Sorry, man. That's not going to happen. I apologize. But maybe they get a pass rusher. We're going to talk about Buffalo shortly. The Ravens defensive ads. Definitely. The Ravens do have defensive ads. And I think that's where we can transfer to the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are going to be the third team. We're going to first go to the Cowboys because we've got to talk about the Cowboys in every video. But the Dallas Cowboys are a team that honestly, like if it were me running the Cowboys, I don't know if they're a buyer, to be honest. Like I honestly kind of feel like this team is not very good. I feel like this team is extremely flawed. And whenever a team has like more than one or two flaws, I don't see them as a contender. And Dallas is kind of one of those teams. But that being said, could Dallas set themselves up for the future seasons, like next year, for being a successful team? Because it wasn't that long ago that they were winning 12 games every single season and just missing out in the playoffs in terms of, choking, really, honestly, but also, close games against teams like San Francisco. So Dallas, I think the biggest priority should be, if they're going to try to turn the season around, they need to add a floor of their run defense. Like their run defense, their run offense, those two areas of their team have been putrid, like arguably the worst in football on both sides. Run defense, almost non-debatably, are they the worst run defense in football? Rush offense, they don't have a good running back. And I really think for the Cowboys, a lot of it is the running back. You watch their offensive line, I think they've gotten better at blocking up front and creating holes and creating avenues for running backs to create explosive gains. But with Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, who's kind of just a guy, a jag, and then you've got Dalvin Cook, who's an old man out there. I mean, none of these guys are going to create explosive plays. Could Dallas maybe make a crazy trade like a Travis Etienne of Jacksonville? Tank Bigsby has kind of taken over that backfield as the running back there. Could they make a play there for a running back? Miles Sanders would be something a little bit less, right? To Carolina. There's other running backs across the NFL. There's plenty of running backs to go around that I think would help Dallas. And Travis Etienne would be, I think, a big fish for them if they were able to land that somehow, some way. Maybe even like to a lower degree. Could they go out there and get a backup like a Khalil Herbert or something like that to maybe just give them a little bit of a spark, a little bit of juice in the backfield, because they definitely need it. Their defensive line, they need run stuffers. Like, could they be a team that looks at Cleveland's roster and goes after a Dalvin Tomlinson, just a big space eater, a guy that I think played under Zimmer once upon a time? That would be a pretty interesting addition right there. A Devon Godshaw of the Patriots. They could really use just a big space eater that's actually good. They've been trying to sign a lot of these guys like Linval Joseph, who's like 1,000 years old. He's just not good at football anymore. Linebackers, another thing that they could use, but linebackers kind of difficult to find right now in the NFL. They could have maybe gone after an Ernest Jones. He, of course, went to Seattle. So then you kind of ask the question, do they need to bring in a receiver? Do they need to bring in a CeeDee Lamb help, like number 2 receiver in Dallas? And that's where Deontay Johnson maybe comes into play. Could they bring in Deontay Johnson? Because the biggest asset for the Cowboys and the biggest guy that they need to get the most out of is Dak Prescott. Like, they've paid him all this money. They've made him their face of their franchise quarterback. They need to have Dak play better. And the only way that's going to happen is if they give them another option at wide receiver. Brandon Cook's out for the year. Jalen Tolbert's not living up to their high expectations for him this offseason. And honestly, like, he's never really been much at the NFL level yet. Jake Ferguson's a solid tight end, but they need a little bit more in terms of another receiver that can separate, that can get open, that can make plays, right? And Deontay Johnson is really the only one, now that Christian Kirk got injured, he's the only one out there that could truly make a difference for a team like Dallas to maybe put their offense over the top. But I think the bigger problem for Dallas, it comes down to the offensive coaching, the offensive play calling, and overall the way it looks from a schematical perspective. It's just very vanilla. It's very hard to make lesser players, average players, look fantastic when you're running a very vanilla style of offense. So that's Dallas for me. Rush offense, rush defense, maybe a running back trade, a smaller degree, maybe a defensive tackle trade just to help them out a little bit, not get embarrassed in the run game. Parsons, Lawrence will be back. Wide receiver is probably out there, but I'm just throwing it out there for Dallas. Retire Jerry, we have in the chat. Yes, retire Jerry. Bring in Bill Belichick. I'm just saying, Dallas pretenders. Dallas they're not pretenders. They're not contenders. They're just a fraud, okay? They're just a fraud. They're a bunch of bums, man. Dallas Cowboys stink this year. I'm sorry. Maybe they'll get a little bit more competitive down the stretch. Packers addressing the edge room. The Packers, I don't think so. I honestly think the edge is pretty good for Green Bay. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think Lucas Van Ness was a first-round pick. I love Rashawn Gary, although he's been a little bit underwhelming this year. Preston Smith is still there. I don't think edge is the problem. I think they should maybe look at a corner because I think they need a number 2. It feels like Jair has played great this year, but other teams just target the other side of the field very often. So I think they could use a corner. Bengals defense, they need help. The problem is the Bengals are not on this list because they just realistically, everyone knows they don't make trades. They don't make moves. They don't do things. So why even talk about the Bengals? Now, I'd be shocked. I'd love it if they made a trade. I do think that they need to help their run defense. Defensive tackle could be an option for them. I also think corner has been pretty dire this year. Safety has kind of been through the ringer the last couple of seasons, but they just need an overhaul defensively. It's not going to be one thing that really fixes them. I think their offense is really good, but their defense is just trash, man. Lattimore to the Chiefs. I doubt it. I don't think the Chiefs will be in the market for a corner. I think if the Chiefs are in the market for anything going forward, they just made a trade for Josh Uche and DeAndre Hopkins. Already made 2 moves. If they make a move, I think it's going to be for a offensive tackle. Now, the problem is offensive tackles are very hard to find. I don't know who would trade their offensive tackle, maybe like Cam Robinson of Jacksonville or something like that. But they definitely need to upgrade left tackle. Like, left tackle is terrible right now for them. So they need to get better there. Detroit needs edge. Yes, we're going to talk about Detroit. But first, let's get to Baltimore. The Ravens, they need to clearly, if anybody's seen Baltimore play, they need to upgrade their pass defense. Their pass defense is just absolutely terrible right now. They can't rush the quarterback. They can't make Jameis Winston throw an interception, guys. Guys, listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. The Baltimore Ravens can't force Jameis Winston to throw a pick. You know your pass defense is bad. You know your pass rush is bad when you can't force Jameis Winston. I love Jameis. I've been telling Browns fans all year, you guys would be good if you had a quarterback, and your quarterback's been sitting on the bench, bro. They never should have got rid of Joe Flacco, but to be honest, your pass defense stinks when you can't force a pick from Jameis Winston. But the Ravens, right now, they're getting an unbelievable level of play from Kyle Van Noy that's not sustainable. I mean, he has 7 sacks. He wasn't even that good in New England at the peak of his ability. I don't know where this came from. Then you've got Owe, who's just a walking injury. He's also kind of up and down, inconsistent. He does have his moments. Very athletic guy. Very fast, very freaky, very strong. But they need another guy to impact the passer, right? Like, Zadarius Smith is not coming because he's in division. Could they get somebody? Like, could Jadeveon Clowney come back to Baltimore? Jadeveon Clowney signed with Carolina in the offseason to go home to play in Carolina, but he was great for the Ravens last year. I think he had 9.5 sacks, something like that. He was very, very productive for them. He was like a top 30 edge rusher in the league. If he could come in and just provide a little bit of a spark, he seemed to love playing in Baltimore. I think he honestly just left to Carolina to play in Carolina for once, and then also just to get paid. Honestly, that's just what Clowney's done throughout his career. But I think a trade could be an option because right now he doesn't seem to be motivated or playing very well in Carolina. So they could move on from him because he's not a good influence in that locker room, to be honest. And Clowney's always much better when he's motivated and he's playing for a good team with a strong culture. And that would be Baltimore. Ojulari, Browning, Ogba, and Chase Young were other options that I thought of. I'm going to keep throwing out Ojulari to teams because I just feel like every time I watch the Giants, he's just playing like unbelievable football. Now, maybe the Giants won't trade him. Ogba is interesting. Miami definitely will trade, and Ogba seems to fit the profile of, a Raven type of guy. He's a bigger, more powerful type of edge player. I don't know if he'd really spark the pass rush, but at least he'd give you a little bit of depth there. It's going to be hard to find a TJ Watt. Okay. You're not going to find a TJ Watt. Cornerback is also possible for the Ravens. Would they be a team that traded for like a Marshawn Lattimore that would completely change their team? The thing is, like, they've got, Marlon Humphrey. They spent a first round pick on a cornerback. Maybe could they go after like their old friend Ronald Darby or something like that? Maybe like a number 2 corner. I feel like Brandon Stevens has not been playing particularly well this year. Maybe if they replaced him, that might be a good idea at the corner position. Wide receiver to me is always an option for Baltimore, and they never seem to really address it. Wide receiver Bateman's played his best football I've ever seen him play, and Zay Flowers is having a breakout season. So they don't necessarily need a receiver, but I do feel like if they had another one, it would only increase how potent their offense was. And it feels like if the Ravens are going to win anything this year, it's going to be through their offense. But I definitely feel like pass defense, whether it be a corner, but specifically a pass rusher, I think would be most useful for the Ravens. Eagles trade targets for edge. I brought up quite a few already. I don't necessarily know if they're going to make a trade at the edge position. The Eagles are always in the market to make trades, though. You always have to keep an eye on them. Would they perhaps go after somebody like Chase Young? I'm just throwing that name out there. That type of profile of player, because he's cheap. He's on a 1-year contract. He has a draft history of a first overall pick. Right? Like, he's a guy that they could bring in. They feel like they have good coaching on that front, the defensive front. Maybe he's somebody that they would go after. I don't know. Like, I don't think they can afford like a Harold Landry or anything like that. We saw Josh Uche get traded. Za'Darius Smith. I honestly feel like their edge rotation hasn't been terrible as of late, but it's not what it used to be. I do agree with that. Ward or Newsome to Green Bay. I do not see. I think Cleveland would be idiotic if they trade Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward is unbelievable. I don't think they're going to trade Denzel Ward. Now, Greg Newsome, I actually predicted that, or didn't predict it, but I gave it as the landing spot. Newsome to Green Bay earlier today on my trade video. I do think what Newsome would bring to Green Bay, he would bring flexibility, versatility. He plays inside, he plays outside. He's 6'1". He's played in man systems. He's played in heavy zone cover 3 Seattle defenses. So there's a little bit of the Green Bay current Niners scheme in that mix as well. And I think Newsome is probably a number 2 corner on a lot of teams, but he's more of the number 3 in Cleveland because Emerson has been paid, Ward has been paid. So I don't think Cleveland is going to move either of those guys, but I think they would move Newsome. Any other big names getting traded? Big names. I don't know what range. Like Max Crosby's not getting traded. That's on that. He's not getting traded. I just doubt it, guys. It's that, like, what are you going to get for Max Crosby? What are you going to trade for Max Crosby? You're just going to try to find the next Max Crosby if you trade Max Crosby. That's my problem. I like one that maybe would be interesting. Would T. Higgins get traded? The Bengals are 3-5. Even like, I know I'm delusional, but even like the Patriots, bro, you're watching Drake May throw to receiver. Drake May's a stud, by the way. You're watching Drake May throw to these guys who can't catch. Like, would the Patriots make a receiver trade right now, or a team like that even? Like a team with a young quarterback, would Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, who are more of a contender this year, would they go out and add a T. Higgins? Like, Higgins is affordable right now, but I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there. I don't know if the Bengals have plans to extend him at all. So maybe that's like a big name that you could think about. Deontay Johnson, I guess, is sort of a big name. Mike Williams is a big name, although not a great player at this point. There's corner in Washington. We're going to get to Washington. But first, we got to talk about the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions, everybody wants to know which defensive end is going to the Detroit Lions, because everyone knows that's what they need. They need to find an Aiden Hutchinson replacement. This team is pretty complete. They look like arguably the most dominant team in football and certainly the favorite in the NFC. Now, they need a pass rush. And I would argue they could also use a corner just because Terrion Arnold has been kind of an up and down roller coaster holding machine. But I think Zadarius Smith is a great fit because I think Zadarius Smith is a guy that he's great. He's very solid against the run. The Lions like their power players. The Lions always draft for strength and power off the defensive line. He's somebody that actually mentioned he'd love to play for Detroit because he doesn't want to, mess with Green Bay and Minnesota. Green Bay and Minnesota are teams he played for recently, and he wants to play against them, he said. So that could be an option. But yeah, Zadarius Smith, he's about as good of an edge rusher as you're going to find at this point in the NFL calendar, in the NFL trade deadline cycle. Like, he's a multi 10 sack, 8+ sack guy. He's probably had like 6 of those seasons in his NFL career. He's still like regarded as a top 20 edge rusher in football. He's a very good number 2. And he wouldn't replace Aiden Hutchinson, but he'd give them a bit more spark to their pass rush. Plus, with as much as the Lions like to blitz, I think he would be very well used in that type of system like he was in Baltimore, Green Bay, Minnesota. Those systems really fit him because he was just very good in that spot. So Zadarius Smith could be one. Harold Landry could be another. The Lions just played Tennessee. If they're going to make a big move, Arden Key maybe even could be another who's also on the Titans. These guys could both be on their way to Detroit. Like, Landry is a really good run defender. Tennessee's been nasty against the run. Detroit really values their run defense, really values their edge rushers to play on all 3 downs. Landry's also been a guy that's had 12+ sacks in his NFL career. So if you're looking for pure sack production, an ability to get to the quarterback that way, Landry could be your guy. I don't see them as a team for Chase Young or Jadeveon Clowney. I don't think their character fits. Emmanuel Ogbah, maybe if they just want to add a little bit. He's also their style of player, but I don't necessarily think he's the level of player they're looking for. I think they're looking for more of that Zadarius Smith, Harold Landry mold, like a former 10+ sack type of guy that can come close to Hutchinson, maybe not as good as him, obviously, but as close as they can get. So yeah, that's my opinion on the Lions pretty much. I would like them to go after a corner. Like, if they could somehow get Marshawn Lattimore in their building, I think he would be a perfect scheme fit for them. They already have Carlton Davis, who's playing really well for them for the most part. He plays physical man coverage, press coverage. That's exactly what Marshawn Lattimore does at a very high level. If you could have those two paired up on the outside, even if your pass rush isn't as good, you could afford to blitz more, have Lattimore, have Davis on the outside with Branch on the inside, and you could lock some teams up in man coverage and really play some physical style of football on the defensive side. A little Rex Ryan vintage Jets style where they just play 0 blitz the entire game. Njoku to Denver. Denver fans are dreaming. Just kidding. I love Njoku. If any team got Njoku, I'd give it an A+. I think he's probably the most underrated tight end in football. Absolute stud. I don't think it's going to happen because I think Cleveland loves Njoku, so I just don't think it's going to happen. Corner in Washington. I do think that's a possibility. The Commanders are going to be the team we talk about last on this list. I will mention a corner for them, so just stick around. Will the Steelers trade for a wide receiver? I do think so. Let's talk about it. So the Steelers, I think their goal is to finally trade for a wide receiver. We heard rumors all offseason. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Brandon Ayuk. He looks like Mike Tomlin. Obviously, that's the trade. Brandon Ayuk, Mike Tomlin, they look like clones. They look like brothers, right? That was the whole deal. And then, can they trade for another player? So Deontay Johnson would be hilarious. I'm not going to lie. It would be a reunion. It would be hilarious, but I don't think that's going to happen because Deontay Johnson and the Steelers, I don't think they get along very much. Now, a name that I threw out earlier today was Mike Williams. Why did I throw out Mike Williams? And Steelers fans, of course, they comment, they hated it. Just forget about it already. But Mike Williams is perfect for Russell Wilson. He's huge. He's got big hands. He's got a huge frame, big catch radius. He catches everything. Just Russell Wilson, throw it up in the air. He's going to catch it. That's exactly what Russell Wilson does, right? Russell Wilson's great with those big-bodied wide receivers that just catch everything, like George Pickens. That's why I love George Pickens this year in fantasy, although Justin Fields started the start of the year. George Pickens, he's just a guy that goes up and he gets it. That's what Mike Williams does. So if they want another one of those guys, Mike Williams. If they want more of a underneath threat, a guy that can convert first downs, right? Adam Thielen, of the Panthers if they're not going to get Deontay Johnson. Adam Thielen is interesting just because he's a zone beater. He's really smart, really savvy. He's not fast or quick anymore. He's way past his prime in terms of that. But man, when it comes to like finding the soft spots and zones, he caught like 100 passes last year in Carolina. So he can still get it done in that regard if they want somebody that's just more of a slot receiver for the team. KJ Osborne of the Patriots has been productive in past seasons with teams like the Vikings. If they want just a little bit of depth, another veteran receiver, another Van Jefferson type, that could be somebody that sticks up. I don't think Kendrick Bourne will get traded by New England unless it's to the Niners. Darius Slayton is a name that I actually really like. I brought this one up as well earlier. I feel like Darius Slayton would actually be my preferred target for the Steelers, unless there's some big name that I'm not aware of. But Darius Slayton is fast. He can stretch the field. He can go. And I think he could create for Najee Harris, the run game, stretch the defense out. He's very fast, deceptive down the field. He can run a lot of those crossing routes off play action. He's just a good player that I think is very undervalued. He basically gets 700 yards every year. So I feel like receiver for the Steelers is definitely must. I would say that guard is a possibility because they did lose James Daniels to injury, and James Daniels was like the best guard in football before he got hurt. But I think they like Mason McCormick, the rookie. I believe it's Mason McCormick, the rookie, who's been playing well. So I think they'll probably stick with him, but guard is a possibility if they want to go that way. Somebody like Brandon Scherf of the Jags could make sense. Cornerback also I would also look at for the Steelers. Dante Jackson is just not my favorite player. I don't think he's a great number 2 corner. He gets lost a lot. He's just not my favorite player. I just wish they would go after somebody at corner to complement Porter, because I really feel like that's their only real flaw on defense is CB2. I actually think the rookie is playing really well at the nickel spot. So CB2 could be an upgrade too, if they could just find like a veteran corner that could fill in. Honestly, like do I have a name like Kendall Fuller of the Dolphins, or could they snag Jonathan Jones from the Patriots? Even Trey White, I would take a chance on. I know that he's looked terrible on the Rams, but maybe in a different system, he'd look pretty good on the Steelers. Steelers get old Russ teammates at wide receiver. Cortland Sutton would be the only one that I would think about. I don't really know who else would be available. Seattle, Tyler Lockett maybe is a possibility. Doubtful, but a possibility. Cortland Sutton has been rumored to be traded for a while, but given where the Broncos are at, I don't really know why they would trade him. Trey Hendrickson trade, maybe. It's possible, more possible than Max Crosby, but I still think the Bengals view themselves as a contender, and I honestly feel like, despite being 3-5, if they traded Trey Hendrickson, just look at how the culture has reacted this season. Like Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, the way they talk in that locker room. If they traded Trey Hendrickson, I feel like the players would just go crazy. So I just don't see that happening for culture purposes. Landing spots for Deontay Johnson. The Chargers would be my preferred location because I think Justin Herbert needs a receiver. Where else? I mean, I think the Chiefs have made their move. I think the Bills have made their move. Those were two teams that clearly needed a wide receiver. I think the Texans low-key could be a team if Stephon Diggs is out for a long period of time. The Niners, if they want a receiver, he would actually be a perfect Brandon Ayuk replacement. He does a lot of the same things very well. The Commanders, I think you would throw out there as well. So those would be contenders, buyers that I think would look at Deontay Johnson. Next up, we're going to talk about the Bills. The Bills, I think, need to upgrade 2 areas of their team, specifically defense. I think McDermott could use a little bit of a boost on his defense. I think one area is run defense. I think if you've watched the Bills, when they've lost games this year, they've given up too many rushing yards and they've just given up time of possession and they've been worn down on the front of their defense. Now, Matt Milano should be back at some point. Von Miller should be back at some point. That will help the front 7 of their defense. That will help their run defense as well. But if they were able to add a defensive tackle to add to their rotation of players, we brought up a few different names already. I don't think Devon Godshaw would be in play because he's on the Patriots, but Shelby Harris, Dalvin Tomlinson of the Browns are definitely names to look at. I think who else could be a name? I don't know if Carolina really has any defensive tackles left, to be honest with you. But Carolina, I also think, has players that the Bills could use, whether it be Jadeveon Clowney, who they've been rumored to potentially add. I've heard that a couple different times, read that a couple different times. If they wanted to add an edge rusher, which they're always in play to add an edge rusher. The Bills always seemingly have like 6 veteran edge rushers that they just rotate throughout a season. Like last year, they had Leonard Floyd, right? This year, could they go after a safety that helps them in the back end, right? They lost Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer this offseason. They haven't really replaced them with veteran additions. Mike Edwards hasn't really played. DeMar Hamlin, I think he's been okay, but not great, in my opinion. They definitely could use an upgrade. Taylor Rapp's a player I really like, and I think the rookies played pretty promising. But what if they could get like Xavier Woods from Carolina, who had a career season last year? Could he maybe come over and help them as a veteran safety addition? Somebody like Andre Sisco from Jacksonville, who's more of a deep free safety, while Woods is more of a box safety. Maybe they could, maybe one of those players, Quandre Diggs from Tennessee as well, signed a 1-year deal with the Titans. He's more of a free safety, Micah Hyde-esque type of player. Or maybe Micah Hyde even comes back to the Buffalo Bills. He still hasn't been signed. So if he does want to play, Buffalo might be welcome to bringing him back. But a safety like Woods, like Diggs, like Sisco, maybe Micah Hyde returns. Run defense, though, I think is crucial because that's the only real area I feel like they will lose games. It's the Achilles heel of their team. The Baltimore Ravens game was evidence of this. Like, their worst matchup in the entire NFL might be the Ravens. So if they run into them, they need to be prepared to stop that run game. And I don't know if they have the personnel. I don't know if they have the beef. I don't know if they have the power. I don't know if they have the strength on their defensive line to get that done, right? I think they match up pretty well with Houston, with Kansas City. I think they match up pretty well in the AFC. They match up pretty well with the NFC overall. Even if they went to the Super Bowl to play Detroit, do they have the run defense to do it, right? Maybe their offense could win a shootout, but Buffalo looks really legit. They just have 1 or 2 small things they need to fix about their team. Bills need to trade for Chiefs refs. That's a good idea. I agree with that. That's hard to do, though. I don't know where the Chiefs get these guys, but they're always prepared, man. They are always prepared to throw that perfectly timed flag. Not going to lie about that. Khalil Herbert trade. Yes, Khalil Herbert could get traded. Well, I brought up his name for Dallas. I think that's a potential one. Another team who would go after Khalil Herbert. I don't know. Not really any contenders, to be honest. I mean, Niners are getting McCaffrey back. Chargers seem happy with J.K. Dobbins. That's like a fringe playoff team. Broncos seem fine. That's a fringe playoff team. It would be more so a fringe playoff team, I think, that would look at somebody like Herbert. Biggest contenders in the NFC. I think that there's 3 that I would say at the end of the day will be there. I think Detroit has to be favored the way they're playing, especially offensively. Green Bay has a ton of potential by the end of the year if they put it all together. I like how their defense is playing overall. They did struggle a little bit against Jacksonville, but I think overall their defensive scheme has improved. They're very explosive on offense. Jordan Love needs to stay healthy. Then you can't count out the Niners. My opinion, still, best coach in the NFC. Team is still loaded. McCaffrey comes back. He's kind of the heart and soul and MVP of that team. They still got studs everywhere. Fred Warner's playing at an all-time level right now. I think they have, when they're healthy, I think they're as big of a threat to the Lions as anybody in the conference. I think otherwise, I'm not really believing the Vikings can keep it up given their recent performances. I feel like they're probably going to dwindle. The Rams could be sneaky, but I don't believe in their defense. The Bears, they're a rookie quarterback that I think is too not turnover prone, but mistake prone overall. Their defense is solid, though. Who else is there? I mean, the Commanders, I think, are probably just too one-dimensional in terms of, I think their defense has played admirably, but I just don't believe in their defense either. Like, I think their offense is really explosive and they're a fun story and they're a young team, but I don't think they're there yet to really contend. The Eagles, I guess you could throw in that mix. Like, it depends on Jalen Hurts, though, 100%. Jalen Hurts is just not playing that well overall. He played maybe his best game of the year against Cincinnati, so that's promising. But overall, if I had to say the top three, I would still put the Niners in there with the Packers and the Lions. That would be how I would go. Chicago, I think, could trade for an offensive lineman. They definitely need help for Caleb Williams, especially with his tendency to hold the ball and try to create a lot. Will Howie make moves? Potentially. He always makes a move. He probably will. If I had to bet money on it, I'd probably say, yeah, the Eagles make some trade that I don't see coming, probably for an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, because that's what the Eagles love to trade for. Falcons, dark horse. I think the Falcons are a playoff team. I think they're somewhat of a pretender. And the reason I say that is they're a young coaching staff. Cousins doesn't have a great playoff track record. And lastly, their defense is not good. Their defense is not good enough. Unless they make a significant addition, I just don't see how they beat in the playoffs those top-tier NFC teams. I could be wrong. I think they'll definitely win their division, but I just don't see where they're going to go after that, because likely they'll be the third or the fourth seed maybe. I don't know, but that's probably going to lead to playing a pretty good wildcard team. Higgins and Hendrickson to Washington. Good luck. Good luck. I do think the Commanders need to address a pass rusher, though, potentially. That's definitely an option for them. Could they go after Sutton or Johnson? I think Washington is more likely to trade for a defender. We're going to talk about Washington last again, guys. But I do think they're going to go after somebody. So I'm going to leave those comments for now. Let's go to the Houston Texans before we get to the Commanders. There's two things that the Texans need to do to get to where I think they can go, because the Texans beat the Colts, a team that's played them really tough this Sunday, and the flaw continues to come up, which is offensive line play. They can't block for CJ. And CJ is great. Their receivers, when Nico comes back, they're great. Now, I don't know what's going on with Diggs. Joe Mixon's playing career football. Dalton Schultz is a capable tight end. Their defense is really good. They have like the best pass rush in football. They get like 5 sacks a game. Between Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, they're pretty much unstoppable. You throw in Danico Autry and potentially a healthy Mario Edwards, and they're very dangerous on the defensive front. They even got guys like, Barnett and Hughes on the edge for depth. Like, they've got a very good pass rush. I think there's 2 areas. The offensive line, first of all, that will just breed consistency for them. They just don't have a lot of consistency on the offensive line in terms of picking up blitzes, in terms of third down protection, in terms of even the run game, just consistent gains in the run game. They're a very explosive offense. They rather hit big plays or nothing or negatives. There's too many negatives in their offense. There's not enough gimmies. There's not enough easy plays. If they can eliminate some of those negatives, turn them into just no gains or even like slight positives, they could go from a good team to potentially very dangerous contender type of team. I already thought they would be there, but these holes have proven to be pretty significant, specifically the offensive line that I think has held them back all year, despite their record. So Brandon Scherff and Daniel Brunskill in the division are 2 names that I thought of. Now, they are in division, but Scherff is an older player that's, near the end of his career. Could Jacksonville take some draft capital from their division rival? They're not going anywhere this year. Give him to the Texans, see him, be nice to him, like as a veteran of the league, be a great player for a while, played on Washington as well. He would really help. He would really help. Could they go after one of the Cleveland guards, Wyatt Teller or Joel Bitonio, right? The thing is with the Texans, they have literally, according to PFF, the worst left guard in the NFL in Kenyon Green. That's a big problem. When you have like the worst player in the NFL at a certain position on the offensive line, that's a clear deficiency that teams are attacking and teams are continuously going after. On top of that, you got Teller, you got Bitonio, you got Scherff. Daniel Brunskill from the Titans is a guy that played in San Francisco. Bobby Slowick, D'Amico are from San Francisco. Could there be a connection there? He's actually a very underrated player. He could fill in at right guard, tackle, left guard. He's played every position on the offensive line. So he'd be a very nice depth piece, probably pretty affordable, even from a division rival, because he's more of a depth piece. And then safety is another position that I thought about. Jimmy Ward's always injured, And I feel like there's players like Murray that just don't deserve to be out there for big roles for the Texans. So as much as I like, how Jalen Petrie are playing at nickel corner and things like that, I think safety could be a position where they do upgrade, just probably in terms of like the box safety role, a guy that can make plays in the run game, a guy that's very active, a ball hawk, a playmaker, maybe even somebody like Tyrann Mathieu. Would the Saints consider trading Tyrann Mathieu? He's had his moments this year. Last year, he was really good last year, actually. Maybe a little bit of just a boost to play on a good defense with a good team. That would be pretty interesting. There's a lot of safeties out there, though, in the NFL. There's a lot of safeties, right? That probably you could acquire. Budda Baker would be a crazy one, but that's the Cardinals at 4-4 probably aren't going to trade him at this point, but just throwing that one out there. But the Texans, I would love to see them address the offensive line. I think that's by far their biggest hole. I think they are a contender if they make that move. Which team is closest to the Super Bowl with one addition? I mean, I guess if you're not including the favorites, which I would say the AFC favorite is the Chiefs, the NFC favorite is the Lions. I would say the Bills in the AFC, and it depends on the addition, right? Like, kind of want to say the Niners, but I don't know. Maybe the Packers. It depends on the addition. It depends on the player. It's kind of a complex question, I would say. But I definitely feel like the Bills would probably be my answer. If the Bills were able to get like one more player for the defensive line, I think that would be pretty huge. I just really impressed with the Bills right now. I think their offense is as balanced, as good as they've ever been with Josh Allen. They're more physical than they've ever been. They obviously have experience. Their secondary, their corners are really good. Like their pass offense with Amari Cooper is very dangerous. Josh is arguably playing the best quarterback in the league right now. So yeah, I think the Bills are very dangerous. Clowney and Horn to Washington for third and a fifth. Yeah, let's talk about Washington. So they're the final team here. And the team that I have, just defensive help. Dan Quinn, defensive help. Dan Quinn's a defensive coach. He's the head coach. Feels like he's been elevating a lot of players that aren't necessarily stars out there. Could they go after a big-time name at corner or even a veteran addition that could stabilize their secondary, right? Kendall Fuller was there previously. Would they bring back Kendall Fuller from the Dolphins? Now, he doesn't necessarily fit the system now, more of a man coverage system, but they've kind of switched that in recent weeks. They've early in the year, they were kind of getting torched because they were trying to let these corners play on islands too much, but they've become more conservative in their coverage. But there's lots of names out there, like, could they go after J.C. Horn, who is more of a physical man press corner at the line of scrimmage? A Marshawn Lattimore, who I brought up as potentially a name for Washington to attack, a number one true corner. Because in my opinion, there's two things that change defenses more than any other, and that is an elite pass rusher and an elite cornerback. And as a Patriots fan myself, just seeing that football more than others, whenever the Patriots would add a number one corner with Bill Belichick, it was like it changed the calculus of the defense. Like when they would have a Darrelle Revis or a Stephon Gilmore or a Ty Law, that would change the way the defense played, because you could use that player in matchups and it would change how your coverage works. It would change what blitzes you got away with, things like that. So that would totally take the Commanders to the next level. Other names out there that maybe they could add, Avonte Maddox is in Philadelphia. He's a corner to look out for certain teams. Ronald Darby from Jacksonville, Trey White from the Rams, Jonathan Jones from the Patriots, who I love, Greg Newsome from Cleveland, I think I brought up. But cornerback's definitely a position. And if I were the Commanders, I'd probably be looking for somebody that I could pay and could be my long-term CB1. And that would probably be Lattimore or Horn. Those are probably the only ones out there that I could really make a move for. Denzel Ward has been brought up. I just don't really see it. Defensive end, I brought up Harold Landry earlier today as a guy that I would target if I were the Commanders. I think they need to look at an edge rusher, specifically with Jonathan Allen out. I mean, Jonathan Allen now being out hurts their pass rush. So Dante Fowler and who's the other guy? Dorrance Armstrong are their edge rushers, their starters. Dante Fowler is not a starting edge rusher. Like, as good as he's played this year, he's played admirably. He's more of a role player, right? He's more of like a pass rushing specialist type of player. That's what he was in Dallas. Get a guy in there that can play on first and second down, that can set the edge. Like a guy like Landry, a guy like even Zadarius Smith, if they want to make that approach. Those would be pretty interesting additions to me for a team that is kind of a fringe contender. They're definitely a playoff team. It's just a question of, are they on the right trajectory? They're a young team. They still feel like they're kind of playing above their heads right now. But hey, why not make a move? Wide receiver is also a possibility for them. I brought up Deontay Johnson. I don't necessarily know if others, trying to think, like, I don't know who else they would really go after there. They maybe were thinking about Brandon Ayuk, but this offense is very yards after catch based. I don't think they're going to find many of those guys in the trade market. A lot of them are veteran possession receivers, so it's kind of hard to find a good fit for a receiver for Washington. Washington, okay, getting J.C. Horn and Zadarius Smith. One of them, I don't think both. How far are the Steelers from the Super Bowl? I think they're still pretty far, man. I'm not going to lie. I think their quarterback position is going to hold them back ultimately, and receiver. Like, I think Russ is fine. He's better than Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph last year, and he might make them more promising, but I just don't feel like they're a team that realistically, could they beat Buffalo or could they beat the Ravens or could they beat the Chiefs in like a must-win game? I just don't see it. I just don't see it because I think their passing game is too inconsistent. The way that Russ plays at this point of his career, he's very feast or famine. Their defense is very good, but they're going to have to absolutely carry them. And I just don't know if that's possible. So yeah, I still think they're fairly far. I think they can make the playoffs though, for sure. What are the Pats seeking with the deadline? The Pats are seeking to trade players and get draft picks is what they're seeking. So hopefully they also are seeking like an offensive lineman or a receiver, though. I wouldn't mind that either, to be honest with you. If they went out there and made a move for a receiver to help out their young quarterback, that would be nice. I don't know if they're going to do that, though, because I don't think this is just a moment to be a seller. I think you also need to think about, if you're a young team and you have a lot of cap space, who can we go get right now for cheap and we can get before they become free agents and we can get the rights to them, especially teams like New England who have struggled to sign free agents in recent years. Go get your guy. Go trade for somebody. Recap the Baltimore targets. Okay, Baltimore, just pass defense. So defensive end, cornerback would be the primary areas I would be looking at. Some of the names that I thought were interesting was Baron Browning of Denver, Ojulari of the Giants, Chase Young of the Saints, Emmanuel Ogbah of the Dolphins. I thought Josh Uche was a great fit, but ultimately he went to the Chiefs. Those were names that I brought up for defensive end. Corner, I think, maybe they could go after, like, bring back Ronald Darby, maybe Jonathan Jones, but I don't think they're going to go out there and like land a number one corner. I just don't think that's going to happen. That's it, guys, though. I appreciate everybody with all the comments. That was awesome. And we had a lot of people in the chat. So that's awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining up. Shout out to Vikman, C. Wayne, Zaddy in the chat, Vol, 4, B. Parker, Kerm. Who else we got? Drop It in the chat. Tommy in the chat. Shout out to you guys. Thanks for coming. Jacob, Kenneth. It's been Mitch. If you guys enjoyed, you can follow me on the BR app for future streams and subscribe on YouTube, The Bottom Line View. I cover all 32 NFL teams, and I post a video every single week. Thanks, guys. Peace.